Have you ever discovered that the people you love the most only seem to love you when they need something from you? The night everything changed started with 9 simple words. 9 words that made my 12-year-old daughter freeze in her chair. 9 words that exposed a secret my family had been hiding for years. And 9 words that eventually cost someone far more than they ever imagined. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. But 2 weeks later, I sent a box to a birthday party. When that box was opened in front of 40 guests, the celebration stopped cold. And by the end of that evening, nothing in my family would ever be the same again. My name is Tori. I'm 34 years old. And for 6 years, I was the invisible foundation holding my family together. Nobody called me the hero. Nobody thanked me. Most of the time, nobody even acknowledged what I was doing. But every mortgage payment, every emergency bill, every holiday gathering, every family crisis somehow found its way back to me. I told myself that was what family was. You help the people you love. You show up. You sacrifice. You give without keeping score. At least that's what I believed. Until the night my daughter learned exactly where she stood in my mother's heart. It was a Sunday evening in October. The kind of evening where the air outside feels cool and clean, but inside my mother's dining room everything feels warm and polished and perfect. My mother loved appearances. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. I always love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. She loved the image of family, the image of togetherness, the image of being the woman who held everyone together. That night her dining table was set beautifully. Cream-colored plates, crystal glasses, folded napkins, handwritten place cards. Everything exactly where she wanted it. I remember sitting down beside my daughter Maddie and noticing something strange. There was a place card for every cousin, every aunt, every uncle, every guest. But there wasn't one for Maddie. First I assumed it was a mistake. Then I immediately corrected myself. My mother didn't make mistakes. She made decisions. And that realization sent a small chill through me. Maddie sat quietly beside me. 12 years old. Bright. Kind. The type of kid who thanked waiters when they brought water. The type of kid who remembered birthdays without reminders. The type of kid who still made handmade cards for people she loved. Especially her grandmother. Dinner started normally, or at least what passed for normal in my family. My mother talked about decorations, flowers, guest lists, catering. Everything centered around her upcoming 65th birthday party. The more she talked, the more excited everyone seemed. Everyone except me, because something felt wrong. Then it happened. She smiled, looked directly at me, and delivered the sentence that would change everything. Your daughter isn't invited to my birthday party. For a second I thought I'd heard her wrong. The room went completely silent. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died. Even the air felt different. I slowly turned toward Maddie. Her eyes were fixed on the table. Her fingers squeezed her napkin so tightly her knuckles turned white. My mother acted like she'd simply announced the weather forecast. The kids' table is already full, she added casually, as if that explained everything. I looked toward the end of the dining room. There were 2 empty chairs, 2 untouched place settings, 2 obvious lies sitting right in front of us. Nobody spoke. Not my father. Not my sister Renee. Not a single person. And somehow their silence hurt almost as much as my mother's words. Because silence is agreement when nobody objects. My mother took a sip of wine, then looked at me with that familiar expression. The one I'd known my entire life. She was waiting. Waiting for me to react. Waiting for me to get upset. Waiting for me to create a scene she could later use against me. But after 34 years, I knew exactly how that game worked. So instead of exploding, I did something she never expected. I became completely still. Maddie, I said softly, go get your coat, sweetheart. My daughter looked up. For a moment I thought she might cry. Instead she simply nodded. That somehow hurt even more. Because children cry when they're surprised. They stay calm when they're used to disappointment. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't the first time she'd felt excluded. It was just the first time it had happened so openly. "Oh, don't be dramatic," my mother said. "It's only one party. Only one party. Funny how people always call something small when it isn't happening to them." I stood up, helped Maddie into her coat, ignored every pair of eyes watching us. My father shifted in his seat like he wanted to say something. But he didn't. He never did. My mother remained perfectly comfortable, certain she was right, certain I'd come around, certain I'd keep doing what I always did. Giving, forgiving, paying, smiling. As we walked out the front door, the cold October air hit my face. For the first time all evening I could breathe. We drove in silence for several minutes. Streetlights passed across the windshield. Houses blurred by. Neither of us spoke. Then finally Maddie broke the silence. "Mom." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, sweetheart." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Did I do something wrong? I felt my heart crack. Not because of the question, because of how sincerely she asked it. As if she truly believed there might be a reason she deserved this. As if somewhere inside her she thought maybe Grandma was right. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. You spend years protecting your child from the world. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize the people hurting them are your own family. "No," I said firmly. "You did absolutely nothing wrong." She looked out the window, then asked the question I couldn't answer. "Then why doesn't Grandma want me there?" And for the first time in years, I stopped making excuses for my mother. I stopped explaining, stopped defending, stopped pretending, because deep down I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. What I didn't know was that this dinner wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the ending of 6 years of sacrifice, 6 years of paying everyone else's bills, 6 years of buying peace with my silence. And before my mother's birthday arrived, I was about to discover something that would change the way I saw my entire family forever. Because while my daughter sat quietly beside me wondering why she wasn't enough, I was about to learn that someone in that family had already answered that question years ago. The next morning I sat alone in my office long before any of my employees arrived. Outside the sun was barely up. Inside the building was silent. Normally I loved that silence. It helped me think. But that morning all I could hear was my daughter's voice. Did I do something wrong? The question kept replaying in my head. Again, and again, and again. I opened my laptop. First I intended to work. Answer emails, review client files, finish reports, anything to distract myself. Instead, I found myself opening a spreadsheet nobody knew existed. Not because it was secret, because I never thought it mattered. For years I had tracked every dollar I spent helping my parents, every payment, every bill, every emergency, every favor. I told myself it was just good bookkeeping. After all, I was an accountant. Tracking numbers was second nature. But that morning something made me scroll all the way to the bottom. And when I did, I felt my stomach tighten. Because for the first time, I wasn't looking at numbers. I was looking at 6 years of my life. 6 years earlier, my parents had almost lost their home. My father's business collapsed after a series of bad contracts. Bills piled up. The bank didn't care about excuses. And foreclosure notices started arriving. At the time I was still building my own life. A single mother. Working impossible hours. Trying to grow my accounting business from nothing. I couldn't help much back then. And the guilt stayed with me. So when my company finally became successful, I made a promise. My parents would never face that kind of fear again. I bought their house outright. $380,000. Cash. I placed them in it for practically nothing. $1 a year in rent. A symbolic amount. The kind of arrangement families make when love is supposed to matter more than money. At least that's what I believed. Then came the property taxes, the insurance, the repairs, the maintenance. Every expense quietly landed on me. When my father's heart surgery left medical bills insurance wouldn't cover, I paid those too. $14,000. No discussion. No hesitation. Just a transfer and a smile. When the roof leaked, I paid. When the furnace failed, I paid. When the water heater broke, I paid. When my mother wanted a family holiday dinner, I paid. When she wanted a bigger family holiday dinner, I paid again. Birthdays, anniversaries, barbecues, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Every celebration somehow ended up attached to my credit card. And I never complained. Not once. Because every time I helped, I felt needed. And being needed felt a lot like being loved. The problem was I had never stopped to ask whether those two things were actually the same. I stared at the final total on the spreadsheet. A six-figure number. Large enough to make most people gasp. Large enough to change someone's life. Large enough that my daughter could have gone to college without loans. I sat back in my chair. Not angry. Not yet. Just stunned. Because suddenly I wasn't seeing generosity. I was seeing a pattern. And patterns are difficult to ignore once you recognize them. The more I thought about it, the more memories started surfacing. Little things. Tiny moments I'd always dismissed. Moments that suddenly looked very different. At Christmas, my niece Brooke and nephew Tyler always had mountains of gifts. Beautiful wrapping paper. Huge bows. Carefully selected presents. Meanwhile, Maddie usually received an envelope. $20. Sometimes less. Usually accompanied by the promise that Grandma would get her something better later. Later never came. When Maddie made honor roll, my mother barely acknowledged it. When Tyler made honor roll, there was cake. Pictures. Phone calls. Celebration. When Brooke won a school award, my mother posted about it online for a week. When Maddie won one, she forgot to mention it. Every single time I explained it away. Mom is busy. Mom is stressed. Mom didn't mean it. Mom forgot. Funny how many excuses you can invent when you're desperate to believe someone loves your child. By lunchtime, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't new. The birthday party wasn't an isolated incident. It was simply the first time my mother stopped hiding it. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. That evening, Maddie came home from school. She dropped her backpack near the kitchen counter and started making herself a snack. I watched her carefully. She seemed normal. Too normal. Like she'd already accepted what happened. That scared me more than tears would have. Kids should be angry when they're treated unfairly. They shouldn't be used to it. I noticed a notebook sticking out of her backpack. Colorful paper folded between the pages. Something caught my attention. Maddie, I asked gently, what's that? Oh. She hesitated, then pulled out a handmade birthday card. My mother's birthday card. The one she'd spent days creating. Bright colors. Careful lettering. Little drawings. Every detail made with love. My chest tightened. You made that for Grandma? She nodded. I started it last week. For a second she stared at the card. Then something changed in her expression. A quiet sadness. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just tired. The kind of tired nobody should see on a 12-year-old face. She slowly opened the card. Looked at it. Then folded it shut again. Without saying a word, she tore it directly down the middle. I froze. The ripping sound seemed unbelievably loud. She didn't cry. Didn't complain. Didn't get angry. She simply dropped both pieces into the trash. Then walked upstairs. Just like that. As if she'd finally stopped expecting anything back. And that was the moment something inside me shifted. Because until then I thought my mother was hurting me. Now I realize she was teaching my daughter a lesson, a dangerous lesson, a cruel lesson, a lesson repeated over years. You matter less. You are second choice. You are the extra person. You are the one who doesn't belong. And worst of all, Maddie was starting to believe it. I stood alone in the kitchen staring at that trash can, at the 2 torn pieces of paper, at a handmade card that would never be given. Something cold settled inside my chest. Not rage, not revenge, something much sharper. Clarity. For years I had been trying to solve the wrong problem. I thought the issue was my mother's behavior. But behavior was only the symptom. The real problem was access. I kept giving her access to us, access to our lives, access to our time, access to our hearts. And every single time she used that access to hurt my daughter. The truth hit me all at once. Nothing was ever going to change. Not because my mother couldn't change. Because she didn't want to. She had already chosen. Chosen which grandchildren mattered. Chosen which daughter mattered. Chosen who belonged. And chosen who didn't. For years I had been begging for a seat at a table that was never meant for us. That realization should have broken me. Instead, it gave me peace. Because once you stop expecting fairness from unfair people, you stop negotiating with them. That night after Maddie went to bed, I opened my laptop again. Not to review spreadsheets. Not to check emails. Not to work. This time I was looking for something else. Something that would change the entire balance of power in my family. And by midnight I had found it. Because while my mother was busy planning centerpieces and birthday decorations, I had started planning an ending. And before her party arrived, I was going to discover a secret conversation that would reveal exactly what my family truly thought of me and my daughter. What I found would make that birthday box inevitable. For the next few days I said nothing. Not to my mother. Not to my sister. Not even to my closest friends. On the surface, life looked normal. I went to work, picked Maddie up from school, answered emails, paid invoices, made dinner. Everything looked exactly the same, but inside something had changed. I was no longer trying to repair the relationship. I was trying to understand it. And the more I looked, the more cracks I found. My mother called 2 days after the dinner, not to ask about Maddie. Not to apologize. Not to explain. She called about money. I should have expected that. Tori, sweetheart. The sweetness in her voice was almost impressive. The kind of sweetness people use when they're asking for something expensive. The caterer needs the remaining balance. I sat quietly at my desk. Outside my office window, people hurried along the sidewalk. Inside I listened. The remaining balance? I asked. 2,200. Her tone brightened. And I found the most beautiful gold balloons. Huge ones. The numbers 6 and 5. They'll look gorgeous in pictures. Gold balloons. For a party my daughter wasn't welcome to attend. I waited. Sure enough, there was more. And don't mention the payment to Renee. There it was. The familiar arrangement. Invisible support. Visible credit. You know how sensitive she is, my mother continued. I don't want her feeling pressured. Translation. I would pay. My mother would receive praise. Everyone else would assume she was the generous one. Just like always. I leaned back in my chair. For years that conversation would have ended one way. With me agreeing. With me paying. With me making everything easier. But something was different now. I'll think about it, I said. Silence. My mother wasn't used to that answer. What is there to think about? The irritation leaked into her voice. You always cover these things. Always. Such a small word. Such a revealing word. Like my help wasn't generosity anymore. Like it had become an obligation. A responsibility. A duty. Something she simply expected. I ended the conversation politely, then sat staring at my phone for a long time. The strange thing wasn't her request. It was how little she seemed to care about what happened 2 nights earlier. As far as she was concerned, the real problem wasn't excluding my daughter. The real problem was whether the balloons would get paid for. That realization stayed with me all afternoon. Then my sister texted. Of course she did. Renee never called when she could send a message instead. Texts leave less evidence. Mom feels terrible about what happened. I stared at the screen. Not what she did. What happened? Interesting choice of words. Like the situation had appeared out of nowhere. Like nobody created it. Like nobody was responsible. A second message appeared. Don't make this into something bigger than it is. Then another. It's just one party. There it was again. Just one party. Funny how people minimize things when they're not the ones being hurt. I typed several responses. Deleted all of them. Then I put the phone away. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't interested in defending myself. I was interested in listening. Listening reveals things arguments never do. And a few days later, I learned more than I ever expected. It happened completely by accident. Or maybe not by accident. Maybe the truth simply gets tired of hiding. My niece Brooke stopped by my house after school one afternoon. She was 14. Smart. Kind. One of the few people in the family who still seemed capable of seeing things clearly. She came to return a casserole dish. At least that was the official reason. The unofficial reason became obvious pretty quickly. She lingered. Hovered near the kitchen counter. Kept glancing at her phone. Like she wanted to say something. But wasn't sure she should. Finally her phone lit up. The screen faced upward. And one notification changed everything. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't trying to look. It was simply there. Visible. Impossible to miss. The group chat name caught my attention immediately. Sunday Crew. Followed by a little grandmother emoji. I frowned. I had never seen that group before. And I knew every family group chat we had. At least I thought I did. Then I saw the preview message. Did Tori pay the balance yet? Need to know before tomorrow. My heart slowed. Not sped up. Slowed. The way it does when you suddenly realize you're looking at something important. Brooke saw me notice. Her face immediately turned red. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she sighed. The kind of sigh that sounds far too old for 14 years old. Aunt Tori. She looked toward the window. Then back at me. Then away again. Finally she whispered something that changed everything. You should probably see this. I felt my pulse become perfectly steady. What is it? She swallowed hard. You can't tell anyone it came from me. I nodded. She handed me the phone. Then walked several steps away. Giving herself distance. Giving herself deniability. Giving herself protection. That alone told me how serious this was. I looked down at the screen and started scrolling. At first it seemed harmless. Party planning, schedules, recipes, guest counts, decorations, normal family stuff. But the deeper I went, the stranger it became. Patterns emerged. Conversations repeated. Comments appeared. Small things, tiny things. The kind of things that seem insignificant individually, until you see them together. Then they become impossible to ignore. There was a discussion about Easter. Someone suggested making baskets only for Brooke and Tyler. Maddie was left out. Nobody objected. There was a conversation about Christmas gifts. Again, Maddie somehow became optional. Nobody objected. There were dozens of examples. Dozens. Every time the same names appeared. The same decisions. The same exclusions. The same silence. And then I started noticing something even worse. My name. Over and over. Attached to money. Never attached to affection. Never attached to gratitude. Never attached to appreciation. Only money. Ask Tori. Tori will cover it. Put it on Tori's card. Tori won't mind. Tori always pays. Line after line. Month after month. Year after year. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't family. I was funding. I was financing. I was a solution. A resource. An account. And somehow that wasn't even the worst part. Because then I reached a conversation from just 2 weeks earlier. The week before the birthday dinner. And what I read next made every piece of the puzzle fall into place. My sister had asked a simple question. Won't people think it's strange if Maddie isn't invited? A reasonable question. A normal question. The answer came from my mother. 6 words. 6 simple words. Words I would never forget for the rest of my life. Maddie isn't really one of ours. I stopped breathing. For a second I couldn't move. Couldn't blink. Couldn't think. The kitchen around me disappeared. The world narrowed to 6 words on a glowing screen. 6 words that explained years of confusion. Years of excuses. Years of wondering. Years of pretending. And then came the messages that followed. The ones that revealed the truth nobody had ever said out loud. The truth my mother had been carrying for 12 years. And once I finished reading them, I knew exactly what I was going to do at her birthday party. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't guessing anymore. I finally knew exactly who my family really was. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. 6 words. That was all it took. 6 words to explain 12 years of confusion. 6 words to explain every forgotten birthday, every missing gift, every cold smile, every moment my daughter had been treated like she was standing outside a window looking in. Maddie isn't really one of ours. I read the sentence again, then one more time, hoping somehow it would change, hoping maybe I had misunderstood. But the more I read it, the clearer it became. This wasn't a moment of anger. This wasn't something typed during an argument. This was what my mother actually believed. And what came next proved it. My sister responded with a thumbs up. A simple thumbs up. Like she was agreeing with a dinner reservation. Not discussing a child. Not discussing her niece. A child. My child. Then another message appeared from one of my mother's church friends. You have to protect the family. Protect the family. I almost laughed. Because the family they were protecting was being funded by the very people they were excluding. The hypocrisy would have been funny if it wasn't so cruel. I kept reading. And with every message, another piece of my life snapped into focus. My mother wasn't punishing Maddie. Not really. She was punishing me. Everything suddenly made sense. The moment I left town. The moment I got pregnant. The moment I built a life she didn't approve of. The moment I succeeded without her permission. That was the day she decided I no longer belonged. And because she couldn't punish me directly, she found another target. My daughter. The child who looked like me. The child who carried my name. The child who reminded her that I had survived without her. Maddie had spent 12 years paying for a decision she never made. I slowly set the phone down. My hands were calm. Surprisingly calm. Because anger needs uncertainty. Anger needs confusion. And for the first time I wasn't confused anymore. I understood everything. Brooke turned toward me. Her face filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Aunt Tori. I walked over and hugged her. Tightly. Because none of this was her fault. You have nothing to apologize for. She nodded. But tears still filled her eyes. Kids always know more than adults think they do. And somewhere along the way, Brooke had figured out exactly what was happening. She had simply been too young to stop it. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen. The house was quiet. The afternoon sunlight stretched across the floor. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to think about one question. What happens now? Not what should happen. Not what would be fair. What happens? Because the truth changes things. Once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. Once the curtain falls, you can't pretend the stage is real. And I had finally seen behind the curtain. That evening, Maddie came home from soccer practice. Grass stains on her shoes, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, cheeks red from running. She looked happy, and suddenly that mattered more than anything else. Not my mother, not the party, not the family drama, just her. We ate grilled cheese sandwiches at the kitchen counter. Nothing fancy, just the two of us. Halfway through dinner, I asked her a question. If you could change one thing about Grandma's family, what would it be? She thought about it for a long time, longer than most adults would. Finally, she shrugged. I don't really need Grandma to like me. The answer caught me off guard, because it sounded so mature. Too mature. The kind of maturity children develop when they've been disappointed too often. What would you change then? I asked. She stared down at her plate, then quietly said something I would never forget. I just don't want to feel like the leftover one. The leftover one. My heart shattered. Not because she said it, because she understood it, because somewhere deep inside she had already accepted that role. The extra chair. The forgotten invitation. The child who didn't quite belong. The leftover one. I looked at my daughter and realized something painful. For 6 years, I had been trying to earn a place at my mother's table. Meanwhile, my daughter had simply wanted a place. Any place. And I had spent so much energy keeping peace that I hadn't noticed how much damage that peace was costing her. That night, after she went upstairs, I sat in the dark living room. No television, no music, no distractions, just silence and clarity. My mother wasn't going to change. My sister wasn't going to change. The family wasn't going to wake up one morning and suddenly become different people. That fantasy was dead. And honestly, good, because fantasies keep you trapped. Reality sets you free. I opened my laptop, then opened my banking accounts, one by one, slowly, methodically, just like I handled client audits. The first account was easy. The monthly transfer, $1,400. Every month. Automatic. Silent. Reliable. Gone with a single click. Scheduled transfer deleted. The message appeared on the screen. Simple. Ordinary. Yet somehow it felt monumental. Next came the utility accounts. Then the insurance. Then the pharmacy payments. Then the maintenance contracts. Then the lawn service. Every hidden support system. Every invisible safety net. Every expense nobody appreciated because nobody even knew it existed. One by one. Click. Removed. Click. Removed. Click. Removed. I wasn't taking anything away. I was simply stepping back. There's a difference. People call it cruelty when you stop carrying them. But carrying someone forever isn't love. It's dependency. And dependency always turns into resentment eventually. By the time I finished, 11 minutes had passed. 11 minutes. That's all it took. 6 years of silent support. Gone in 11 minutes. I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a suitcase for so long I forgot how heavy it was. The next morning, my mother called again. This time her voice sounded different. Softer. Careful. Almost nervous. Tori, sweetheart. I already knew something had happened. The caterer had probably called. The balance had probably come due. Reality was beginning to arrive. I've been thinking about what happened. Interesting. Not apologizing. Thinking. A very different thing. Maybe I was a little harsh. A little. Not wrong. Just harsh. The closer she got to accountability, the more carefully she avoided it. I'd seen clients do the same thing during audits. People always dance around the truth before they're forced to face it. You know I love you, she continued. I'd really like you to come to the party. I waited. Then came the important part. Just you. Just me. Not Maddie. Not my daughter. Not the child she'd humiliated. Just me. As if I would celebrate while my daughter sat at home excluded. As if I would accept the invitation she denied her own granddaughter. The fact that she genuinely expected me to agree told me everything. "And Maddie?" I asked. A long sigh. The same sigh she'd used my entire life whenever someone challenged her. "Tori, don't start. Don't start. Not let's fix this. Not let's talk. Not I'm sorry. Don't start." I smiled, because for the first time I wasn't starting anything. I was ending it. "No." Silence. Then colder silence. Then anger. "You've always been selfish." There it was. The accusation every giver eventually hears when they stop giving. Selfish. Funny word. People never use it while you're sacrificing. Only when you stop. I let her talk. Let her blame. Let her complain. Because none of it mattered anymore. The decision had already been made. The box was already taking shape in my mind. And what would be inside that box was about to change everything. Because while my mother still believed she was preparing for the best birthday party of her life, I was preparing a gift she would never forget. And when it arrived at that garden, in front of every guest she wanted to impress, the truth she had hidden for years would finally be impossible to ignore. The week of the party arrived, and for the first time in years I felt calm. Not happy, not excited, just calm. The kind of calm that comes when you finally stop fighting reality. The box sat on a table near my front door. Simple, elegant, cream-colored with a navy ribbon. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just a gift. At least that's what everyone would think when they saw it. Inside was something very different. Inside was the truth, the entire truth. And truth has a way of becoming very heavy once people are forced to carry it. Saturday morning arrived bright and cold. The kind of autumn day that makes the sky look endless. The birthday party was scheduled for 4 o'clock. I arranged for the courier to deliver the box at 3:30, right before the speeches, right before the cake, right before my mother would have her audience. Then I did something that surprised even me. I completely stopped thinking about the party. Instead, Maddie and I went out for pancakes. Real pancakes. The giant fluffy kind she loved. The kind covered in strawberries and whipped cream. The kind I normally would have said no to because they were too much. That morning I said yes. To everything. We sat in a little diner near the river. Talked about school. Talked about books. Talked about whether cats dream. We laughed. We ate too much. And for the first time in weeks, my daughter looked like a child again. Not the leftover one. Not the forgotten one. Just a kid enjoying pancakes on a Saturday morning. After breakfast, we walked through the park. Leaves drifted across the pathways. The air smelled like wood smoke. And as I watched Maddie running ahead of me, something hit me. I wasn't losing anything. For years I thought setting boundaries meant losing people. But standing there beside the river, I realized something important. You can't lose people who only value what you provide. Because they were never truly yours to begin with. At 3:30 my phone buzzed. One message. Delivered. That was it. No speech. No drama. No announcement. Just delivered. The box had arrived. And somewhere across town my mother was smiling. She probably assumed I had finally given in. Probably assumed I had sent flowers. Or jewelry. Or some expensive birthday surprise. Because that's what I always did. I always made things easier. What she didn't understand was that this wasn't a birthday gift. It was an ending. And endings rarely look dramatic at first. They usually arrive wrapped in ordinary paper. At exactly 4:18 my phone started exploding. Call after call. Text after text. Voicemail after voicemail. Mom. Renee. Mom again. Then more family members. Then numbers I barely recognized. I looked at the screen. Then turned the phone upside down. And left it there. For 6 years, every call from my family had become my responsibility. Every emergency. Every problem, every crisis, every bill, every complaint, every disaster. For 6 years I answered immediately. Not that day. That day I watched my daughter laugh as she raced toward a swing set. And for the first time I chose her instead. Hours later, after Maddie was asleep, I finally checked my phone. The story unfolded piece by piece. From Brooke. From cousins. From relatives. From people who had witnessed what happened. The box had been opened in front of everyone. Exactly as I knew it would be. My mother wanted an audience. The audience became the problem. First she found the deed. A legal document transferring full ownership of the house into my parents' names. No conditions. No strings. No catches. The house was theirs. Completely. At first she was thrilled. Until she realized what came next. The second document explained that all financial support was ending immediately. The monthly transfers. The insurance. The property taxes. The maintenance. The prescriptions. The repairs. Everything. Every invisible support system. Gone. Not because I was angry. Because I was finished. Then came the accounting. 6 years. Every payment. Every expense. Every contribution. Every sacrifice. Page after page. Line after line. Ending with a total so large that several guests reportedly stopped talking when they saw it. But it was the final item that changed the room. The torn birthday card. The card Maddie had made. The card she'd ripped apart after learning she wasn't invited. And attached to the inside of the lid was a simple place card. One name. Madeline. The seat my daughter never received. The seat she'd waited years for. The seat that should have existed naturally. The entire garden reportedly went silent. Not because of the money. Not because of the house. Because suddenly everyone could see the child at the center of it all. Not a family argument. Not a financial disagreement. A child. A 12-year-old girl. A little girl who had spent years trying to earn love that should have been given freely. And suddenly the excuses stopped working. Then came the moment nobody expected. The caterer approached. Professional. Polite. Completely unaware of the emotional bomb that had just exploded. He simply wanted payment. The remaining balance. $2,200. The balance everyone assumed I had already paid. Only I hadn't. And for the first time, the question everyone avoided had to be asked out loud. Who was responsible? The answer wasn't there. I wasn't there. The invisible foundation had disappeared. And suddenly everyone could see the building shaking. My mother cried. My sister blamed people. Family members argued. Secrets surfaced. Years of quiet favoritism spilled into the open. The image my mother spent decades protecting cracked in a matter of minutes. Not because I exposed her. Because the truth did. Truth doesn't need help. Eventually it introduces itself. The part that stayed with me most came later. After the guests left. After the party ended. After the decorations came down. My father called. Not immediately. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The way he always did everything. His voice sounded older. Tired. Broken. I didn't know. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he continued. I should have known. That was the difference. Most people apologize for what they did. Very few apologize for what they failed to see. He admitted he had looked away. Admitted he had chosen comfort over truth. Admitted he had failed his granddaughter. And somehow that honesty mattered. Because it was the first genuine accountability anyone in my family had shown. Weeks later, he asked if he could spend time with Maddie. Just him. No conditions. No pressure. No expectations. I agreed. Carefully. Slowly. And every Saturday since then, he has taken her for ice cream. They talk. They laugh. They build a relationship that should have existed years ago. My mother never apologized. Not once. She explained. She justified. She blamed. She cried. But she never apologized. And strangely, I stopped needing one. Because closure isn't receiving the apology you deserve. Closure is realizing you no longer need it. Today, my life is quieter. Smaller in some ways, but infinitely lighter. No emergency phone calls. No hidden bills. No constant pressure to keep everyone happy. Just peace. Real peace. The kind peace that arrives when you finally stop paying for your place in someone's life. My daughter doesn't ask why grandma doesn't love her anymore. Because she eventually understood something I wish I had learned much earlier. Real love doesn't have guest lists. Real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't make children feel like leftovers. And family isn't the table you're born into. Family is the table where someone saves a seat for your child without being asked. For years, I kept trying to earn a place at the wrong table. Then one day I stopped. And that decision changed everything. So if you've ever felt like you're carrying an entire family on your back, if you've ever confused being needed with being valued, if you've ever spent years paying emotional bills nobody appreciated, remember this. You don't owe anyone endless access to your kindness. And the moment someone starts treating your love like an obligation instead of a gift, you have every right to close the account. Gently, quietly, completely. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever say isn't a speech. It isn't an argument. It isn't revenge. Sometimes the most powerful thing you'll ever say is simply, no more. And trust me, the people who benefited most from your silence will hear it the loudest. And before you go, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Tori did the right thing by cutting off the financial support? Or should she have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments because I read as many of them as I can. And if this story touched you in any way, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps this channel reach more people who need stories like this. Also tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your city right now. I love seeing how far our community stretches around the world. And remember this, the people who truly love you will never make you earn your place in their lives. They will never make your children feel unwanted. And they will never treat your kindness like an obligation. Protect your peace. Protect your worth. And most importantly, protect the people who would never stop fighting for you. Thank you for spending this time with me.